There comes a moment in every legend's life when the mask slips, and the truth, long hidden beneath years of laughter, finally surfaces. For Rowan Atkinson, the man the world innocently calls Mr. Bean, that moment has arrived at age 70, when he finally speaks openly about the struggle millions never saw. He was the quiet child mocked for his voice, the anxious young man rejected again and again, the global icon who carried a character that slowly consumed him. And now, after decades of silence, he's ready to reveal something that fans have suspected but never fully understood. That behind the comedy was a life shaped not by joy, but by pain, endurance, and an extraordinary fight to survive the very thing that made him famous. The childhood that shaped the silence. Long before the world knew him as Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson was just a quiet boy from Consett, County Durham, born on January 6, 1955, carrying a grief he never chose. His parents, Eric and Ella, were simple, hard-working people, raising 4 boys on a modest farm. But tragedy struck before Rowan was old enough to speak. Their eldest son, Paul, died in infancy, leaving a silent ache floating through the Atkinson home like a lingering shadow. Rowan would later say he grew up sensing sadness before understanding it, a confession that explained far more about his early years than he ever intended to reveal. By the age of 5, another battle had begun, one no one else could fight for him. His stutter emerged suddenly, gripping his voice and strangling every attempt to speak. Words caught in his throat like broken fragments, refusing to come out, especially when he needed them most. In a house full of confident, outspoken brothers, Rowan slowly retreated into himself. His parents tried to help, but exhaustion, grief, and survival left little room for the delicate work of understanding a child's invisible pain. School made everything worse. At Durham Chorister's School, where he studied alongside a young Tony Blair, children poked fun at his halting speech and unusual facial expressions. Some even called him alien. The word lodged inside him like a thorn. At 11, he was already learning that silence was safer than humiliation. He often sat alone, watching conversations unfold like scenes from a world he couldn't enter. A teacher later recalled him as a shy boy with a rubbery face, never knowing that the same face would one day make the world laugh. And yet, inside that silence, something extraordinary was forming. At 13, during a trembling recitation in class, Rowan discovered that when he performed, not as himself, but as someone else, his stutter vanished completely. The voice that failed him in daily life flowed effortlessly the moment he stepped into character. It was a miracle in miniature, the first hint that the very weakness that tormented him would one day become the foundation of a global phenomenon. A brilliant mind at war with itself. As Rowan moved into adulthood, the contradiction inside him only grew sharper. Academically, he excelled in ways that seemed almost effortless. He earned top grades in his A-levels, secured a place at Newcastle University, and by 1975 graduated with a degree in electrical and electronic engineering, one of the most demanding fields of study. To the outside world, he was a prodigy, disciplined, methodical, almost destined for a life in laboratories and research halls. But inside, he was still the boy who feared the sound of his own name, the young man whose voice collapsed the moment he tried to speak as himself. In 1975, he entered the Queen's College, Oxford, to pursue a master's degree, following in his father's footsteps. While working on advanced topics like self-tuning control systems, he felt the pressure of expectation tightening around him. His family believed he would become a scientist. His professors saw brilliance. Yet Rowan felt a quiet dread settling in his chest. It was as if I was walking into a life that didn't belong to me, he later admitted. Then, in late 1975, fate intervened. He wandered into an Oxford drama rehearsal and watched actors run lines beneath buzzing stage lights. Something inside him shifted. When they asked him to try, he stepped forward nervously. And as soon as he spoke, not as Rowan but as a character, his voice flowed without interruption. The stutter vanished, as if it never existed. It was liberating, but also torturous. Because the moment he stepped off stage, the stutter returned with even greater force. Between 1978 and 1979, he faced rejection after rejection from the BBC. Casting directors found him odd, too silent, unmarketable. His stutter collapsed entire auditions, leaving him humiliated and questioning whether he belonged anywhere. One winter night in Oxford, overwhelmed by failure and loneliness, he nearly walked away from performing forever. But 1976 changed everything. Richard Curtis saw Rowan perform and was stunned. He later said, "It was like watching someone burst into light." For Rowan, it was the first time someone truly recognized his brilliance. Not despite his silence, but because of it. That recognition ignited the fire that pulled him through the years of doubt still ahead. The breakthrough that nearly broke him. By 1979, Rowan finally received the opportunity he'd been fighting for. The BBC offered him a spot on a new satirical show called Not the 9 O'Clock News, a gamble that could either change his life or expose his deepest vulnerability on national television. When the first episode aired on October 16, 1979, almost no one watched. Fewer than 1 million viewers tuned in. Critics dismissed the show completely, calling it offensive, chaotic, and unworthy of television. For Rowan, already battling self-doubt, the failure was devastating. Yet behind the scenes, something surprising happened. The BBC controller loved it. He ordered another series immediately. That single decision saved Rowan's career before it even began. As the show grew, Rowan's brilliance became undeniable. His physical sketches, like Gerald the Gorilla, where he delivered the now iconic outburst, "Wild? I was absolutely livid," transformed him from an awkward outsider into a comedic force. The show won a BAFTA, earned international acclaim, and even helped redefine British sketch comedy. But success came with a price. By 1982, the cast was collapsing under exhaustion. Long writing nights, relentless filming schedules, and creative battles pushed everyone to their limits. For Rowan, whose anxiety often simmered beneath the surface, the pressure was suffocating. His stutter returned during interviews and table reads, sometimes so severely he couldn't get through a line. He hid it by slipping back into characters, but the strain of living in constant performance was beginning to carve its toll. And then, there were the fractures behind closed doors. When Chris Langham was abruptly fired after the first season, Rowan fought to keep him, one of the rare moments he openly challenged authority, but the producers refused. The fallout created a quiet bitterness that lingered for years, deepening Rowan's fear of conflict. By the spring of 1982, everyone was burnt out. They ended the show at the height of its success, something almost unheard of in television. Pamela Stephenson went to Hollywood. Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones created their own series. And Rowan, exhausted and carrying years of unspoken insecurity, stepped directly into another battle, a massive historical comedy that would nearly destroy his confidence all over again. The Weight of Genius, Blackadder, and the Silent Collapse. When Rowan began Blackadder in 1983, it was supposed to be his triumphant evolution, his chance to prove he could lead a full-scale series, not just sketches. But what followed was one of the most brutal chapters of his early career. The first season, filmed across castles and harsh outdoor locations, drained the entire team. Rain ruined shoots, budgets exploded, and morale disintegrated. The BBC nearly canceled the show. Critics were unimpressed, calling the humor confused, lost, or buried under expensive costumes. For Rowan, perfectionist, anxious, and still terrified of being exposed as inadequate, it was torture. He carried the stress heavily. He worried the failure would drag him back into the world he desperately tried to escape. Years later, he admitted that Blackadder's early chaos nearly shook his belief in himself. But 1986 changed everything. Ben Elton joined as co-writer, and the second season became tighter, sharper, and more character-driven. It was the first time Rowan felt surrounded, not exposed. Hugh Laurie, Stephen Fry, Tony Robinson, Miranda Richardson, they weren't just co-stars. They were a lifeline. For the first time in his life, Rowan didn't have to carry the entire weight alone. Blackadder II, Blackadder III, and Blackadder Goes Forth elevated him to a new level of stardom. Yet the deeper truth was more complicated. The show's success came partly because he didn't have to speak rapidly, exactly the kind of environment where his stutter might sabotage him. Blackadder's dry, calculated delivery gave Rowan the control he needed. He built the character around speech patterns he could manage, turning his weakness into a performance weapon. But even in triumph, there was tragedy. The final season, set in the trenches of World War I, was emotionally devastating. The slow-motion ending, now regarded as one of British television's greatest moments, hit Rowan harder than he expected. The futility, the loss, the quiet bravery, something inside him resonated painfully. When fans praised him for the emotional depth, they never knew that he wasn't acting. He was channeling years of silence, fear, and buried grief. Blackadder made him a star, but behind the sharp wit and polished delivery was a man still fighting the same internal battles he'd carried since childhood. A man about to confront the most exhausting role of his life, the character that saved him and slowly destroyed him. When Mr. Bean first appeared on January 1st, 1990, nobody, not even Rowan, understood what had just been unleashed. The nearly silent character, built from fragments of Chaplin, Tati, and Rowan's own childhood isolation, immediately captured global attention. Within months, episodes were airing in more than 200 countries. One episode drew over 18 million UK viewers. The character became larger than any celebrity, any show, any language barrier. For a man who once feared speaking his own name, the world was suddenly listening, even though he barely said a word. But the truth behind that success was far darker. Mr. Bean required a level of physical intensity that most comedians never touched. Every twitch, every expression, every controlled silence demanded extraordinary precision. Rowan once admitted that performing the character drained him emotionally and physically to an uncomfortable degree. The irony was cruel. The character that didn't speak was the one that exhausted him the most. Behind the scenes, filming was brutal. He often ended days collapsed from fatigue, his body aching from exaggerated movements and stunts. "It's stressful," he once said. "The responsibility feels heavy." And audiences never saw the breakdowns between takes, the tension in his jaw as he forced perfect expressions, or the long moments he spent alone in dressing rooms, mentally preparing for another silent performance that the world expected to be flawless. By the late 1990s, the pressure intensified with the release of Bean, 1997, a film that earned over $251 million, becoming one of the most successful British comedies in history. Everyone wanted more of Mr. Bean, but Rowan privately dreaded each new project. Fame took on a suffocating quality. The character followed him everywhere: airports, restaurants, family holidays, even when he tried to slip unnoticed into quiet corners of life. 2007 brought Mr. Bean's Holiday, and with it another hit, but also another wave of emotional collapse. Rowan later confessed that even a simple bicycle scene left him exhausted for days. He was only in his early 50s, yet the character was already breaking him. Bean made him a legend. Bean made him rich. But Bean also took pieces of him he would never get back. The confession at 70, what he finally admits, as the world celebrated Rowan Atkinson's 70th birthday in January 2025, Millions shared Mr. Bean clips across social media, scenes of chaos, innocence, and laughter. But quietly, Rowan himself was reflecting on a lifetime that almost no one truly understood. After decades of performing through anxiety, exhaustion, heartbreak, and relentless public pressure, he finally began to speak honestly about the cost. He opened up about the 2001 plane incident in Kenya, a terrifying moment when his family's pilot fainted mid-flight. Rowan, who had never touched aircraft controls, took the wheel and held the plane steady for minutes that felt like hours. He saved everyone on board, yet even afterward he rarely spoke about the fear that stayed inside him. "People expect you to be the funny man," he once said. "They don't expect you to be human." Then came controversies he never planned to face. His 2023 article criticizing electric vehicle technology sparked national debate. Lawmakers blamed him for slowing UK EV adoption. Environmental groups condemned him. Old fans said he had betrayed his own ideals. But Rowan insisted he was simply telling the truth as he saw it. Tired of pretending, tired of wearing masks, tired of carrying silence. His personal life was no refuge either. His 2014 separation from Sunetra Sastry, after 24 years of marriage, unleashed a media storm that painted him as cold, distant, even selfish. The age-gap relationship with Louise Ford only intensified the scrutiny. He said nothing publicly. Silence became both his shield and his prison. At 70, he finally admitted what many had long suspected. Mr. Bean was never easy for him. In fact, Bean was the hardest, most painful role of his entire life. He revealed that every episode, every film, every performance demanded a kind of emotional self-destruction he could no longer endure. He confessed that he often felt like a fraud, celebrated worldwide while privately unraveling. Fame did not heal him. Success did not quiet his doubts. And after decades of playing a man who rarely spoke, he finally told the world why. "I think silence was always where I felt safest." Rowan Atkinson may have spent a lifetime making the world laugh, but only now do we understand the weight he carried behind every silent expression. At 70, he finally revealed the truth millions had felt but never heard, that the man who created joy was often fighting battles no one saw. And maybe that's why Mr. Bean remains unforgettable. He was born from pain, shaped by fear, and carried with extraordinary courage. Which Mr. Bean moments made you laugh the most? Share your comments below. And if you want more deep stories about the legends behind the characters you love, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's so much more to uncover.